the occupied West Bank, and the West Bank, along with the Gaza Strip and East Jerusalem, have been under Israeli military occupation since 1967. And they are recognized by international law or an international law as occupied territories, as you know them, the occupied Palestinian territories. And 20 years before the occupation of these territories, which constitute 22% of the size of Palestine, Israel was created on 78% of the size of Palestine in 1948. And it was created through a violent process of the disposition of more than 750,000 Palestinians from their homes. And many of them continue to live up until now in refugee camps in neighboring Arab countries across the world, and also inside the occupied Palestinian territories. And part of this violent process through which Israel came into being was massacring Palestinians. More than 30 massacres took place between 1947 and 1949, and more than 500 Palestinian villages have been destroyed. We call this the Nakba, or the catastrophe, and we also emphasize that our Nakba is ongoing because Israel continues to dispossess Palestinians and continue to deny us our right to self-determination. And Great Britain, which colonized Palestine from 1917 until 1948, supported and was directly involved in the creation of Israel and in the Palestinian Nakba from the very beginning, starting from facilitating Jewish immigration to Palestine during its colonial rule of Palestine. And also it included training the Zionist paramilitary groups that committed the massacres and the crimes against Palestinians in 1948, and continues to support it through direct connections with Israel, aiding it and financing its apartheid regime, which I will come to later on. What I wanted to emphasize is that, or to say, is that since the very beginning, since the creation of Israel, Palestinians started experiencing environmental injustices, because Israel has been destroying the environment as a tool in order to ethnically cleanse Palestinians and obliterate our cultural heritage and existence, and also history. I'd like to start from 1948, when Israel was created. So before 1948, Palestinians used to live a sustainable relationship with their land, because most of the majority of the Palestinian population were farming communities living in harmony with nature. But that relationship has been disrupted when Israel expelled 2/3 of the Palestinian population, as I just mentioned, and many of them ended up living in refugee camps. And after Israel was created, what they did is that they uprooted native Palestinian trees, and they covered up more than 86 destroyed villages. The ruins of these villages were covered up with non-native piney trees, and this project was implemented by the Jewish National Fund. And these trees have been the reason of substantial environmental damage. It is believed that they are responsible because they are not suitable to our environment. These millions of trees that have been planted, they are believed to be the reason for the increasing wildfires that are hitting the country every year. Like, for instance, in 2016, more than 1,500 wildfires hit the country only in 1 year, mainly in areas planted by the Jewish National Fund planted with non-native pine trees. After the occupation, or before that, during the 1950s, just a few years after the creation of Israel, Israel started, in addition to the afforestation project, Israel also wanted to change the landscape of Palestine, which then became Israel. And under the slogan that Israel is making the desert bloom, but Palestine was not really a desert. It's more about making Palestine a European colony for European Jewish settlers or newcomers to the country. So what Israel did is that also it is a project led by the Jewish National Fund, is that they drained Hola Lake and its surrounding swamps, claiming that they want to increase productive agricultural land, but they failed to do so. And not only this, they destroyed the natural habitat for animals and also for plant species. And the drainage of Al-Hola Lake resulted in reducing the amount of water flowing to the Sea of Galilee, one of the main sources of fresh water in the country. And that deterioration of the flow of water in the Sea of Galilee also affected the water flowing in the Jordan River, because the Sea of Galilee used to move water to the Jordan River. And that's been badly affected because of the drainage of Al-Hola Lake. And after 1967, Israel started also draining and consuming huge amounts of water from the Jordan River, which is located in the Jordan Valley in the West Bank, that was occupied in 1967. And now the Jordan River, which is believed to be the place where Jesus Christ was baptized, is almost dry. It's full of dirt and sewage water because of Israeli practices, which are colonial practices in the first place. And now talking about the issue of water in particular and how it's affecting the environment. When the Jordan River was almost drained, Palestinian communities, farming communities in the Jordan Valley who used to rely on water coming from the Jordan River have been badly affected in the Jordan Valley. And agricultural land, fertile agricultural land in the area is getting affected more, especially because of the decline of rainwater every year and Israel's control of other sources of water in the area. So what we are witnessing in the occupied territories now is the desertification of large areas of agricultural land. And that is threatening the biodiversity in the area. And it's also affecting the well-being of Palestinians, affecting their access to food as well. At the same time, Israel, in addition to Israeli denial of Palestinians' access to water, which is enabled through Mekorot, Israel's national water company, which is building the water apartheid infrastructure, where the water only goes to illegal Israeli settlements, and Palestinians are denied access to water. Israel has been systematically polluting our underground water and soil through moving its most polluting industries to the West Bank among Palestinian communities. And I'm talking about more than 300 factories that have been moved from Israel to the West Bank after 1967. And these factories, they contaminated our underground water, our soil, but more than this, they've been detrimental to the health of Palestinians in the area. In areas where these factories are operating, the number of Palestinians diagnosed with cancer is increasing, and there is direct connection between these factories and the increase in the rate of cancer. So this is for me, and I'm here borrowing what Rob Nixon calls slow violence is a form of slow violence. So Palestinians are not killed by Israeli guns or by Israeli airstrikes or rockets like in the Gaza Strip. They are killed by slowly and little by little by these factories and other forms of pollutions caused by Israel. This is the situation in the West Bank. Briefly, regarding the Gaza Strip has been under Israeli siege for 16 years, and during these 16 years, Israel has been constantly, like every now and then, they violently assault the Gaza Strip. The most recent of these assaults was a few days ago, where 33 Palestinians were killed, including 7 children. And the Gaza Strip, or the environmental damage that the siege and the assaults of Israel in the Gaza Strip have caused, represents environmental damage, or what an environmental damage could look like at its worst. It's in the Gaza Strip. So, for instance, 97% of water resources in the Gaza Strip are undrinkable, and that is directly linked to Israeli practices of water apartheid in the West Bank, because historically, the Gaza Strip used to rely on water resources flowing from the mountainous areas in the south of the West Bank. And Israel, as part of the siege and the geopolitical separation that has been made between the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, Israel blocked the flow of water from the West Bank to Gaza. And because people in Gaza didn't have any other source of income other than underground water, they overpumped water, and this has resulted in its contamination. Adding to this, Israel has in every attack on the Gaza Strip, Israel keeps hitting and targeting the sewage treatment plants, and that has resulted in the contamination of underground water with sewage water. Adding to this, Israel denies Palestinians in the Gaza Strip access to electricity, which means that the sewage treatment plants are not operating properly. And as a matter of fact, a quarter of the diseases in the Gaza Strip are caused by the contaminated sources of water, and 12% of infant deaths in the Gaza Strip are also caused by the contamination of water. So it poses a threat to the lives of Palestinians in Gaza, which is, again, it's a form of slow violence, and this shows how Israeli violence against Palestinians takes different forms. Another thing that I'd like to talk about the Gaza Strip is how Israel has been systematically also destroying agricultural land in a different way than what is happening in the West Bank. So constantly, Israel sprays agricultural land in the Gaza Strip with chemicals, and this has contaminated the soil. It has also destroyed the agricultural sector in the Gaza Strip, and it has been reflected on the health of people, and also on the environment in the area. This is what is happening in the Gaza Strip. I can't speak volumes about Israeli environmental injustices, but I know I'm mindful of time, so I prefer to stop here. And then if you have any further questions about other aspects of Israeli environmental injustices, I'm happy to answer these questions. Thank you.
I think I will just follow what has been said by Manal, maybe by starting that I'm obviously not a native English speaker, so if I do not express myself very well, or if it's not clear, please don't hesitate to ask question in the chat. I would love to repeat or to try to explain it differently. So as Victoria and Thomas said at the beginning, my name is Fiona Chekroun. I'm the Europe coordinator for BDS campaign, working for the BDS National Committee based in Palestine and leading the BDS movement. So let's go back to the basic, which is what is the BDS movement, because we can hear about it a lot, but sometimes we just don't know what exactly is calling for or what's from where it's come from. So I think it's good to just start by the basic. So I think it has been quite clear by what Manal explained that for more than 70 years, Israel has denied Palestinians their fundamental rights and has refused to comply with international law. And Israel maintains a regime of settler colonialism, apartheid and occupation over the Palestinian people. And this regime is, and this system of oppression is only possible because of international complicity. Government failed to hold Israel to account, while corporations and institutions across the world help Israel to oppress Palestinians. And because those in power refuse to act and to stop this injustice, Palestinian civil society has called for global citizens' response of solidarity with the Palestinian struggle for freedom, justice, and equality, which is the BDS. So the BDS, it's B for boycotts, D for divestment, and S for sanction. And this call was launched in 2005 by the broadest coalition in the Palestinian society. It's inspired by decades of Palestinian popular resistance against Israel apartheid, settler colonialism and occupation regime, by the South African anti-apartheid movement, the US civil rights movement, and a lot of different anti-colonial movements across the globe, and particularly in the global South. And so the BDS calls for boycott, divestment, and sanction as a form of non-violent pressure on Israel apartheid. Boycotts involve withdrawing support from Israel apartheid regime, complicit Israeli sporting, cultural, and academic institutions, and form of all Israeli international company engaged in violation of Palestinian human rights. When we talk about divestment campaign, it's campaign urging banks, financial institutions, local councils, churches, pension funds, university to withdraw investment from the state of Israel and all Israeli and international companies that sustain Israeli apartheid. And when we talk about sanction campaigns, it's about pressuring government to fulfill their legal obligation to end Israeli apartheid and to not aid or assist its maintenance by, for example, banning business with illegal Israeli settlements, ending military trade and free trade agreement with Israel, as well as suspending Israel's membership in international forums such as the UN bodies or the FIFA. And so the Palestinian BDS committee calls call to urge nonviolent pressure on Israel until it complies with international law, and particularly by meeting the three demands of the Palestinian civil society, which is the first one, ending the 1967 occupation and dismantling the apartheid wall. The second one is upholding the right of Palestinian refugees to return to their lands, home and properties, as stipulated in the UN Resolution 194. And the third one is ending Israeli institutionalized and legalized system of racial domination, which meet the UN definition of apartheid as claimed for decades by Palestinian civil society and recently acknowledged by human rights organizations such as Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, Israeli human rights organization B'Tselem, many UN experts, and that is based on a growing consensus of the fact that Israel is committing the crimes against humanity of apartheid. And so this movement is soon celebrating, the BDS movement is soon celebrating its 18th anniversary. And through the years, if we look back, we can count major milestones. And I just would like to give some example, because it's helpful for us to see what basically is the impact of the Palestinian BDS movements. As I mentioned, one of the recent milestones is definitely to have organizations such as Amnesty International having a report recognizing that Israel is committing the crime of apartheid. when the movement starts, the BDS call was launched 18 years ago. This was not a consensus among the international community. It was a consensus by the Palestinian civil society calling for the recognition of apartheid, but it has been built up by creating the momentum and the pressure and the understanding by the grassroots movement at international level and human rights organization that Israel is committing these crimes against humanity of apartheid. We can see major TV network personalities, including I don't know, Ali Velshi or John Oliver, music icons like John Legend, Steve Rogers, Snoop Dogg, star athlete in leading football club, including in the UK, and particularly athlete of color, writer as Nobel Prize of Literature Annie Ernaux or Sally Rooney, that are really showing support and showing an increase in solidarity with Palestinians. We also have Hollywood celebrities like Susan Sarandon, Viola Davis, John Cusack, Wentworth Miller, Mark Ruffalo, Emma Watson, Natalie Portman, who have also expressed solidarity like never before. We have an increasing support from trade unions worldwide, from South Africa to Chile, passing by Norway. You have dock workers union in Oakland, California, and Durban, South Africa, or in Italy, in Livorno, who have heeded appeals by Palestinian trade unions and declared support for refusing to handle Israeli ships. For example, I think it was 2 years ago, during the last, the military aggression on Gaza in Oakland, with the support of the community, they even succeeded in making an Israeli Zim ship to turn around after failing to offload for days their military equipment. Over the last few years, thousands of student unions across the globe, LGBTQI+ groups and social justice movements have also endorsed BDS accountability measure. You have massive sovereign fund in Norway, in Luxembourg, in Netherlands, in New Zealand, that have divested from Israeli or international companies and banks that are implicated in Israeli occupation. You have mainstream churches in South Africa that have endorsed BDS, major churches in the United States that decided to divest it. And we have Victoria today from Sabeel-Kairos that is also doing amazing work in the UK to have churches divesting from complicit company and or Israeli banks. And that's really important because it's a huge community of believers as well that are part of this. BDS has won the endorsement of major trade union, as I said, from representing tens of millions of workers. It's also targeting companies. And one of the examples is the campaign that forced the large French company Veolia to abandon its illegal Israeli project after losing 20 billion with a B in tenders worldwide over a 7 years period of campaign, which is huge. And yeah, we know that at the end, the board of Veolia was like, okay, it doesn't work to stay. We need to leave because we're just losing too much money. And that was possible because of grassroots movement pressure. Other companies that are complicit, such as Heidelberg Cement, Caterpillar, G4S, Orange, among others, suffered from various reputational damage, divestments or loss of tenders due to BDS campaigning. Recently, I would say that maybe you heard about Barcelona's mayor decision to cut ties with Israeli apartheid and end the twinning agreement that the city had with the city of Tel Aviv. I mean, maybe you can hear my French accent, but I'm born in Belgium, and recently the city of Liège, which is one of the major cities in the country, has also decided to cut its institutional relation with Israel. Oslo in Norway recently also adapted the public procurement, deciding that they want to exclude companies that are directly or indirectly involved in their OPT from their public tenders process, which is quite huge as well. And you have more and more movement joining, and not just solidarity movement with Palestine, but also climate justice movement that are supporting the BDS movement and some of the campaign. You have the movement for Black Lives in the US that has called for BDS in a courageous statement. And you have more and more people, also politicians and members of parliaments that are standing and calling for military embargo or calling for accountability for Israeli crimes. And as I can see in the chat, indeed, Sam Smith decided to give up their concert in Tel Aviv because of pressure and requests from the partners of the BDS movement, including queer groups that are working and fighting pinkwashing of Israeli apartheid, and which is really important. And so yeah, BDS movement is really a Palestinian-led nonviolent movement that became global and growing more and more, including in the UK. And as Manal mentioned earlier, Palestine is clearly a climate justice issue. There are so many connections that exist between the struggle for freedom, justice, and equality, and the climate justice struggle. And yeah, we're here today to kind of explore what are the connections with the UK and where there is maybe a space for climate justice movement in the UK, and where there is already a space for this movement and for your movements as well to join and support and be in solidarity with the Palestinian people. I will stop here for now, because the idea is also not to talk too much, and I will maybe give the word to Manal to explain a bit more about some of the campaigns that are active in the UK and might interest you.
Thanks a lot, Fiona. That was great. Yeah, as Fiona said, the BDS movement was created because stemming from the belief that Israel was created and sustained through the, and now its system of apartheid settler colonialism is sustained through international complicity and silence. So silence is also a form of complicity, but also direct complicity, financing that oppressive regime against the Palestinian people and our environment. So I'd like to talk about connections between the UK, or why the UK should be involved in supporting the BDS movement and supporting our struggle for liberation. First of all, as I just mentioned, Israel was created by the UK and through support from the UK. So I think that there is a high responsibility on the UK to stop being involved and complicit in Israeli apartheid as part of correcting the wrongs that have been done to us and continue to be done. That's one thing. The other thing is that part of cutting these ties and ending this complicity, let's focus on certain campaigns or certain campaigns in order to do so. To start with, I'd like to talk about the Jewish National Fund, which I already mentioned and in my intervention at the beginning. So the Jewish National Fund was created in 1901, and its headquarters is located in the UK. It is registered as a charity, so it is tax exempt, and it usually organizes fundraising campaigns in order to collect money and fund its colonial and apartheid activities inside Israel, like in the Naqab, in order to displace 35 unrecognized Palestinian communities in the Naqab desert. This is who are second-class citizens of Israel. Their ethnic cleansing is ongoing for decades, and also to entrench the Israeli illegal settlement enterprise within the West Bank, which is deemed illegal under international law. So the Jewish National Fund, through the money it collects from the UK and other countries across the world, it finances war crimes. there has been campaigning against the Jewish National Fund for more than a decade, like that Stop the GNF campaign, and partners and supporters of Palestine in the UK have been directly and actively involved in that campaign, like Palestine Solidarity Campaign and Scottish Palestine Solidarity Campaign. And that campaign is targeting the charitable status of the Jewish National Fund, because such an organization or an institution that from the very beginning was actively involved in the colonization of Palestine shouldn't be registered as a charity, shouldn't be allowed to organize fundraising events and collect money in order to support the system of oppression subjugating us, and also to defund this organization. The campaign is still ongoing, and it has achieved different forms of success, including raising awareness, more awareness about the Jewish National Fund and what it is doing in Palestine, and also, for instance, in Scotland, one of the achievements is that the Jewish National Fund fundraising events have become underground. They don't announce anything about their fundraising campaigns because they are worried about the backlash. This is not enough, but it is an achievement. And the work, as I said, continues. What I wanted to emphasize is that we shouldn't underestimate any kind of campaigning against the Jewish National Fund or any institutions supporting Israeli apartheid. For instance, in Canada, supporters of Palestine, they've been campaigning against the Jewish National Fund until it was forced to distance itself from Jewish National Fund in Israel. Well, this is a partial victory, as it was described by Friends of Palestine in Canada, who led the campaign, because the aim is to put an end to its charitable status. But this partial victory is important, and it will lead to other victories. That Jewish National Fund Canada is distancing itself from Jewish National Fund in Israel, and it's not involved in the illegal settlement enterprise in the West Bank. This is about the GNF. The other thing I want to talk about, which is playing a key role in the illegal settlement enterprise in the West Bank, is Netafim. Netafim has a branch in the UK. It's active in the UK, and it implements agricultural projects here in the UK, and collect and make profits through these projects that it implements in the UK in order to finance the illegal settlement enterprise and the larger system of apartheid in Palestine. So to give you a brief overview about Netafim, Netafim is a company. It's the largest company for micro irrigation equipment in the world, and it was created in 1965 in kibbutz Hatzarim in the Naqab desert, shortly after displacing Palestinian Bedouin communities from the area. And it is one of the companies that work with Mekorot, Israel's national water company, that has built the apartheid infrastructure, and it also supports Israeli settlers, illegal settlers, to develop the technology that makes their agriculture in stolen Palestinian land and through stolen Palestinian water the most profitable. It's worth mentioning that Netafim works in mining. So on the one hand, it greenwashes Israeli environmental injustices by claiming that Israel is an eco-friendly country across the world, because it operates in 25 countries worldwide, including in the UK. And at the same time, it works in the mining industry. So it's never a green company. It's never a company that seeks to advance sustainable solutions in the field of agriculture. It's really important to work against this company raise awareness about it, because in mainstream media in the UK, they are biased towards Israel. They portray Israeli companies and Israeli organizations like the Jewish National Fund as if they are making the desert bloom, while they are the ones responsible for environmental injustices in Palestine and the desertification of our land, as I mentioned. Just briefly, I want to mention that there is a campaign that you might be inspired by, a campaign against Netafim that started in 2017 in India, because Netafim is also destroying and affecting badly farmers in India. So there has been a campaign which is still ongoing, and there were different achievements. Farmers groups boycotting Netafim and not accepting to buy its technology. In addition to an awareness raising campaign combined with that campaign against Netafim, in order to expose the real face of Israel, which is a looter of our resources and a colonial power that has destroyed the environment in order to colonize Palestine. Thank you.
Thanks, Manal. Always, yeah, powerful to hear you. I will maybe end this this discussion by briefly mentioning three other campaigns that are active in the UK, and where, yeah, just for you to have a brief introduction and see if that's something, I mean, to learn about what's happening in the UK, and that can be connected to both the climate justice movement and the BDS movement. So the first one that you may have heard, I think, and maybe took part as well, is the campaign against the bank Barclays. So Barclays is kind of famous for financing fossil fuels and basically financing climate chaos. And I know that it was one, I mean, it still has been a target of climate justice movement in the UK and also in, I mean, when I started the webinar just before you enter in the room, Thomas was also explaining that part of the movement, and some of you started as being involved in the COP26 demonstration in Glasgow, and I remember that at the time I was also there, and Manal was supposed to come but got her visa denied, and so that's why I went, because I have the privileged Belgian passport, and I think it's always important to mention that. When I was at the COP26 and took part in some actions, Barclays was one of the major target of the climate justice movement at that moment, and still ongoing now. And so that was also the case of some Christian groups and movements, and in checking again a bit later today, I found this article from the Christian Climate Action explaining why they stand against Barclays and how they make the connection and between the importance of their faith and the importance of fighting for climate justice and fighting against Barclays. And so recently, like less than a year ago, the organization War on Want, PSC, Palestinian Solidarity Campaign, and CAT, the campaigns against arm trade. It's always like, you have this kind of acronym and you never know what exactly it means, but these three organizations decided to launch a campaign to target Barclays because Barclays is basically holding over 1 billion in shares and provides over 3 billion in loans and underwriting to 9 companies whose weapons, components, and military technology have been used in Israel armed violence against Palestinians. And so by providing investments and financial service to these companies, Barclays facilitates the provision of weapons and technology for Israel militarized repression of Palestinians. And militarized violence against the Palestinian people is a central feature of Israel occupation and apartheid regime, including the illegal apartheid wall, demolition of Palestinian homes, brutal armed crackdowns on Palestinian protesters, and indiscriminate bombing campaigns on the Gaza Strip. And this system is maintained through the involvement of financial institutions and banks like Barclays, but also because of the involvement of governments. And so one of the companies in which Barclays invests is Elbit System, which is one of the major weapon industry and weapon company in Israel that is responsible of many bombing and surveillance system over the Palestinian people, and which is kind of famous also to export weapons after tested these weapons over the Palestinian bodies and society, and basically sending weapons to the world in saying tested on field, which is meaning tested on Palestinians. And so yeah, this campaign is ongoing and really working hand in hand with climate justice movement. The General Assembly was last week, with action in front of the building of the General Assembly, and the idea is really to build up a campaign, but also create links and intersectionality with campaigns, climate justice movements campaigns targeting Barclays, because at some point, Barclays is investing in different type of oppression as many financial institutions, and as British, as citizen of the United Kingdom, it's also where there is a legitimacy to target all national companies and all government to end complicity with a regime of apartheid and colonialism. And as Belgian, that's how I started as well to be involved in the BDS movement. It's to believe that it's really my legitimacy, and what I want to fight for is to end complicity. That's the basic things that I can do as a Belgian citizen, I would say. And so we also know that, I mean, above the fact that Barclays is involved in financing climate chaos and fossil fuels, we also know that warfare is a pillar, is also like very polluting. It's one of the most polluting enterprise in the world, and so that's connecting as well the different struggle. And so I'm just putting in the chat the link to the campaign page of Barclays if you are interested to have a look at it later on. The second campaign that I would like to mention is basically the campaigns about Mekorot that has been mentioned a bit earlier by Manal, and I think that maybe some of you have already heard about it because it's kind of linked with the UK right now. So just basically Mekorot is the national water company of Israel, which supplies 90% of Israel drinking water and provides 80% of its water supplies. And it's a company that it's state-owned, which is kind of interesting and important to keep in mind. And so Mekorot not only operates within Israel in internationally recognized pre-1967 borders, so yeah, within the Green Line, but also in the occupied Palestinian territory. It's the Israeli government executive arm in the OPT for water issue. And so in East Jerusalem and other part of the occupied West Bank, Mekorot supplies water to the settlements. It also supplies a substantial share of the water consumed by Palestinians who are prevented from developing their own water sector. And so as a result, Mekorot is actively involved in conducing and maintaining the Israeli occupation. And we know that, I don't know if it's a good pronunciation, Arup, I will maybe just copy paste it in the chat because yeah, French accent, you know. So we know Arup, the British engineering firm, is in talks with Israel national water company Mekorot to team up on water projects in various parts of the world. And so Arup is also working with several Israeli startups to try and bring their technologies to Britain with the support of UK Israeli Tech Hub and at the British Embassy in Tel Aviv. And so there is here a direct link between a British firm, a British company, with the system of oppression Israeli system of oppression against Palestinian. And so that might be something to explore and see what are the climate justice movement already working on that, or maybe see if there is some link to make. And finally, something that a last campaign that I want to tackle, and that I think you're also interested in, is the question of the gas. So yeah, the current context with the invasion of Russia in Ukraine has created a massive change, geopolitical change in Europe and worldwide. And so we saw Europe trying to escape from Russia and deciding to find a new oppressive system in going to and investing in. And so there is, for example, the Euro-Asia interconnector that will link Europe electricity infrastructure with Israel national grids, that includes and de facto annexes the illegal settlement on stolen land. And so this colonial settlement will benefit, therefore, from all trade of electricity between the state-owned Israel Electricity Corporation and Europe. And it will be built and planned by Siemens. And so the interconnector will give international recognition and also normalize, making normal Israeli legal settlement in the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem, and will also help to enable the expansion of the settlements as well, because of the access of electricity. There is also the role of fossil gas and Chevron. Contrary to the propaganda claims by the fossil fuel lobby, gas is of course not a transitional fuel. It's a fossil fuel used by greedy multinationals to hold on to profit and influence while devastating ecosystem and the climate. We all agree on that, and we all denounce this. And I don't know if you heard about Chevron, but Chevron is a US company contributing to finance Israel regime of apartheid, settler colonialism and occupation by paying billions of dollars for its gas extraction license. And so with its extraction activities, the corporation is also complicit in apartheid Israel practice, or depriving the Palestinian people of its rights to sovereignty over its natural resources, including, among others, to the illegal siege of Gaza and blockade of Gaza 3, which Israel imposed by brutal and deadly force. Chevron is also implicated in Israeli illicit transfer or extracted fossil gas to Egypt through a pipeline illegally crossing the Palestinian exclusive economic zone in Gaza, owning Palestinian million in transit fees. But Chevron is not, I mean, Chevron is kind of famous for being involved also in other parts of the world, in Latin America and in Asia, depriving the rights of indigenous population from this part of the world. And so you can see once again how you connect the different struggle, which the indigenous struggle and the climate justice struggle. And so, yeah, I see that Manal and Victoria put some information in the chat, so don't hesitate to have a look at the link after and see the different connection. And looking at the clock, I think I will just stop here because I think it's good to have a space for Q&A, and it's good that the recording will stop like this. We can feel in a kind of a safe space for asking question. And there is, I mean, basically there is no stupid question, because we learn every day, we make connections between our own context and global context. And so yeah, we're happy. I mean, I'm sure Manal as well, but we're really happy to be here with you today and to hear your question and being able to better connect each other for more social justice.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, guys. That was a really interesting talk, and I'm very impressed that you managed to interweave with each other. That's a good Zoom skill. So yeah. I just thought before we start the recording, just to quickly talk about YCCN, and then Victoria can talk about Sabeel-Kairos for people who might not know from each organisation who are on the call who don't know much about it. So YCCN started in 2021 in the lead up to COP26, which was held in Glasgow, and the big campaign that year was a pilgrimage all the way up across the UK into Glasgow, which sort of connected with different churches and different Christian organisations up and down the country, and it was a really strong, successful bit of like political activism. I think it was really carried YCCM through. And at the moment, that we have the Take the Veg Pledge campaign, which looks at encouraging Christians and anyone really, but especially Christians to in their everyday lives, and then especially at various Christian festivals that are happening this summer, to maintain a vegetarian diet for a week, and then as a stepping stone to building that in the longer term. And I think that's and then that building on to a presence at different Christian festivals like Greenbelt this summer, which I know Sabeel-Kairos will also be at. So yeah, I think what really struck me about your talk especially was thinking about the role of Britain, especially as a colonial power. I think that's something that the climate movement and the environmental justice movement has only really come to terms with it probably in the last decade, and for quite a long time. There was not much reflection on the sort of colonial impacts of Britain environmentally around the world. And so I put something in the chat earlier about the People's Health Movement and their tribunal, which looks at the impact of toxic air and of methane from oil fields and massive forest fires caused by kind of past British colonialism from poor infrastructure and unsafe drinking water, lack of irrigation systems, like we've heard in the Palestinian context, and also ongoing projects of British colonialism. So the British Army in Kenya, I know a few years ago, was responsible for a large forest fire that deprived lots of indigenous Kenyan peoples from their homes in that bit of Kenyan forest. So I think that's something that I think will be really important to think about and see how we can build a sort of an intersectionality between these two movements, between a sort of British, which is a domestically focused young network of Christian climate activists, and solidarity with the Palestinian cause and the Palestinian people. So thank you for talking about all the links we can see. I think the concept of divestment and boycott and sanctions are quite historic for progressive Christians. The South African boycotts in the 20th century are a real hallmark of British and Western progressive Christians, their activism in the past. So I think drawing on that, particularly with the example of Barclays, is such a perfect example of where we can really see that the idea of boycotting and divestment can make a big impact. It can, and Palestine is one of the examples we can see in the world today that does that really well. It's probably the most prominent example of a boycott and divestment and sanctions movement today. So I think the climate movement has quite a lot to learn from it as well. The only other thing I'd like to quickly say is I'm sure a lot of people are aware of Michaela Loach on Instagram, who I think, and not just on Instagram, I just follow her on Instagram. She's great activist who I think models this really well. I know I've read some of her stuff talking about the intersections with Palestine, with the colonial legacy of Britain, and particularly as a Black Christian in Britain, and how that experience really puts the idea of climate justice, with the emphasis on justice, with climate being one pillar and the environmental degradation of people's living conditions being one pillar, and that being part of a whole, an intersectional whole of injustice in the world that Britain has a lot to answer for. And so thank you very much for the talk. And Victoria, if you talk about the work of Sabeel-Kairos.
Okay, good. Yes, okay, so I'm doing tech and talking, it can be a bit challenging. Good, so Sabeel-Kairos has come as a UK organisation, and we work to connect the work with Kairos Palestine and Sabeel Jerusalem, who are two liberation theology organisations in Palestine to people in the UK. So it came actually out of people in the Iona community who were concerned about Palestinian rights, and then it went to Greenbelt. So actually Sabeel-Kairos was launched at Greenbelt, I think in 2004, I think, don't quote me on that. I see on our website, and so since then we've been campaigning with churches. I sent the link of the different boycott and divestment successes that we've had, starting with the Quakers and the URC, the Methodists, the Church of England really isn't pulling its weight. So if we've got any Church of England people on there, please get involved. Yeah, so in that sense, I think just the divestment work we do obviously connects with YCCN. And the idea for this webinar today came from me and Josh Mock coming to the BDS European Conference, which was in London this year. And we heard about the Just Oil campaign, and we just thought about how much it connected with the YCCN work and what we've been doing. And also how in the Christian community in the UK, there is a little bit of a silence to talk about anything to do with Palestine. It's obviously a contentious issue. And in the UK as well, we have like quite a few barriers to talk about it in the like interreligious, interfaith kind of movement. So we just thought that this was a really important way to kind of get people to understand a little bit about Palestine. And so I've just been doing some social media work about the Nakba. So this year is the 75th year since the Nakba, which is called the catastrophe for Palestinians. So it's the day after the day of the day that Israel celebrates being Israel. So by 1949, 750,000 Palestinians had either fled or been forced from their home. So at the core of this, when we're thinking about Palestine, it's an environmental campaign. It's about the injustices that so many people have been removed from their land and removed from their home, and that they're no longer in control of where they're from. And I'm thinking about the recent kind of Christian publications about environmentalism. So Hannah Malcolm's Words for a Dying World, which I'm sure most of you have read, there's no chapter on Palestine. And Palestine is really kind of one of the last like anti-colonial campaigns to do with the British Empire. So I think it is really, really important that we kind of get to grips with it and begin to treat it in the same way that we treat it, we as the Christian churches treated like the South African kind of apartheid in the 1980s. So I've written a few blogs which are on our website that talk about why as Christians we should think about kind of this way of seeing Palestine as an environmental injustice, and also a little bit of information, not as well as Manal or Fiona did, about how environmentalism and Palestine connect. So please have a look at that. And we have some other opportunities as well as Sabeel-Kairos. So we're going to be at Greenbelt with YCCN, of course, and we're bringing Muna Nassar to come and talk at Greenbelt. We've got Dawood Nassar from the Tent of Nations. So Dawood has a farm. So the Nassar family have a farm that's currently being surrounded by 4 settlements now, 4 Israeli settlements in the West Bank. So Dawood's coming, he's coming to Edinburgh. So he's speaking in Edinburgh on Friday, and Liverpool next week, and London on the 25th of May. So if you go to our website, sign up, go and listen to Dawood. He's a very good speaker. And this is an incredible campaign. This family's been like trying to keep their land for decades now. And we're also doing a trip for young people to go to Palestine this July, so the 18th to the 27th of July. So this is like the last week to sign up. So if you would like to come and see what's going on for yourself, and it's a really life-changing experience, please find out on our website or give me an email, and we can get you involved in that. Great. So please now come for question and answers. I'm going to give it back to Tom, who is going to do the mechanics and ask whatever questions you can think of to Manal and Fiona, or just any reflections or ideas about how we can take this campaign forward in the UK, either as Sabeel-Kairos. Suggestions for me are more than welcome, or as YCCN, or in our individual churches or communities.
Yeah, great. Shall we start the recording now? I think only you can do that because you're the host. Brilliant. Okay.